Okay, let's hope I can do this. So excuse my voice. I'm going to try and walk through this. I got laryngitis this morning, so I'm going to try and just give you a few. This is not going to work. Let's try. I'm going to whisper. That's much better. It is. It's great. So you guys just took a race with Devin Barrett, who's the fastest drone racer in South Africa. He just won our South African Drone Racing Championship, which was hosted 3 weeks ago in Meyerton. So you saw that was one lap. He had to do two. That was 1 minute and 18 seconds. And he was the fastest guy by about 10 seconds. Was the second guy behind him. So I'm Alan Ball. I'm the chairman of FPVSA, and I'm the owner of Flying Robot. So I started flying radio control at 13, and I was always passionate about flying and aviation. And luckily, I had my parents help fund me through a glider pilot's license at the age of 16. So I had actually got the glider pilot's license at 17. And then at 19, I did my private pilot's license. But I started flying FPV. I couldn't keep up the PPL, so I thought, well, I was in a career era. I thought, let me try FPV. And it was suggested to me from one of the developers I used to work with. And he said, I'm doing this thing, it's FPV. And I'm like, what's that? That's so cool. It's like you wear these goggles and there's a camera and you fly a radio control plane. I'm like, that's awesome, I'm in. So I got hooked 7 years ago, which was quite the early days of drones and FPV. And it was all DIY and self-built. So, let's go back. That's some of my creations. So we've got a tricopter, which was a David Vinderstal RC Explorer tricopter that he released on the internet. The flight controller was 3 gyros and your own etched PCB and all the components that you soldered on your own. And then from there, I learned about FPV systems and TXs you shouldn't be using. The class is not here. Got a pair of goggles and started exploring with mini quads as well. I also built a full wing and went from there. But the hobby sort of became hard because I was getting everything from overseas. So I found that I needed to start a store locally that would help myself as well as all my friends get parts quicker and have spares available. And that's sort of how Flying Robot was born. We did fix the slide. It's now broken, thanks. My font didn't go through. But we're basically a retail store that sells drone parts and accessories. We try and support the mini quad industry and the drone racing industry, but we also do commercial work as well as rapid prototyping and development and R&D with commercial drone companies. We've also built drones and delivered drones to government and a whole bunch of other suppliers. And we work very closely with RSC holders and commercial operators. A couple of them in the room today. And the whole story was I started the first drone race, official drone race in South Africa. I called it FPV Fest because I was like, well, let's get all my friends together and we'll have some fun. And this drone racing thing was taking over overseas, and we thought, well, let's get something going. So I sort of did this event in Stellenbosch with a whole bunch of us. And we had such a great turnout, and it was a lot of fun for 2 days. But it was sort of the birth of what do we do in terms of getting it within the infrastructure of a SAMAR, South African Model Aircraft Association, and taking it further than just one little event and one little drone race. So I got invited to Tech for Africa, where I spoke without laryngitis. And we set up a little track within F&B Stadium. And during the break, we actually got to fly in F&B Stadium, which was quite cool. And this actually went out globally on with CCTV Africa, the Chinese network. And and it gave us quite a lot of exposure. But what also coincidentally happened around the same time was I got an invite from Martinez Potgieter, who's the chairman of SAMAR, to come visit them and have an inaugural meeting to establish some sort of formal group or special interest group that'll represent FPV and drone racing in South Africa. And that's sort of the story of how SAMAR bringing us in. We went to their offices at Denel, and we had a meeting with some of the formal players within the community. And it was more community, it was just some of the shops and some of the guys that were flying and organizing stuff within the community and had a good following of people. And that's how we created Fly FPVSA. We're now a special interest group that falls under SAMAR, which falls under RASA, which then falls under the Aero Club of South Africa. But we fall under those guidelines, and we try and promote safe FPV flying within the country. So these are what we stand for. So promoting flying, develop and maintain policies and safety aspects within the FPV hobby, preparing an annual calendar of scheduled events, as well as a national championship and league. And then obviously liaise and cooperate with other bodies like CAA and various others, and just making sure we comply. And so what's actually happened is it's evolved in terms of the drone racing. It's sort of told a story here. So when we first started, we used pool noodles, PVC pipe, and some steel, which didn't work very well. The drones didn't like the steel at all. So what we've got now is proper carbon or fiberglass arc gates, which are easy on the drones, they don't break, and they seem to take a pounding. We've also now got inflatable gates, which cost a fortune, but they also seem to survive the impacts from the drones and are a lot kinder on the drones than the steel. And within our first year, our big first event was Drone Nationals, and this was organized by the committee with various sponsors, and held at Klerksdorp, where SAMAR had their Power Nationals. So it was their main, all the disciplines within Air RC basically take part at Power Nationals there. So it was our first time at Power Nationals, and we arrived with 46 pilots, and we were the largest field ever they've had. So you can imagine the new boys on the block arriving with 46 guys, and they're like, what the hell is going on? Never mind the fact we arrived with a massive Bedouin tent and this whole racetrack set up. And yeah, it was quite daunting, but it was very cool. We had a whole bunch of classes, which nowadays has changed. And we sort of ran the whole event over 4 days. Camped at the airfield and had a really good time. But out of that, we crowned a champion, which was Fred Potgieter. He was actually one of my team pilots, actually my only team pilot that was sponsored. And Fred actually was great for the hobby. He challenged a lot of things in terms of the way we did things and the way we raced. And he kept up to speed with what was happening internationally. And he also, he comes from aviation, so he owns Mother City Skydiving in Cape Town. So he runs a full skydiving operation in Cape Town. But he pushed the boundaries of what we should be doing and also used his own money to fund trips overseas. So he went and competed in Hawaii at Drone Worlds. He also went to China, competed in Shanghai, and then came back and went to Korea as well and competed in Korea. But every time he came back, he fed back great information about what we should be doing and how we should be going. So some of the other things that came out of that year after our Drone Nationals, our first one, was we started seeing clubs spawn up in the regions. So I'm chairman of Cape FPV Flyers, and I started that club because we found that some of the RC clubs didn't accept FPV and drones as a thing. They weren't very friendly about it. So you bring your Phantom 4 and they're like, no, you can't fly here. There's a nice big runway, but no, you can fly there. And it's tiny, so you can imagine we were just getting frustrated and put into a corner and told we'll fly there. And we were like, no, we want to fly where you guys fly, and they didn't accept that. So we formed a club, which was a bit, not really what we want to do. We want to be sort of inclusive. And we've seen the same thing happen in KZN, and there's some more clubs here in Joburg that are also very open, and they have space to do drone racing and drones. And so Barnstormers is a very good example of that. They've done really well here. What we also saw is we started formalizing this year, and this is all the feedback we were getting from the pilots going overseas and what overseas organizations were doing. And what you can hardly see here is there's a 15 by 15 grid, and we used that to point out all our flags, our gates. Well, there's gates. We started creating icons for different tracks, and then we would standardize the track across the whole country. So Cape Town be racing the same track as Joburg, so they could time themselves and start measuring themselves against each other countrywide. And all those results were published on our website. And that led us to the next Drone Nationals, so a year later. We were lucky enough to be asked by the RAND show to take over the central area of the RAND show after the Easter weekend. And this time we dumbed down our classes, so had less drones competing, and then we pulled only the top 16 through into the main arena, and crowned another winner, which was Joshua Blum, and he happened to be one of my team pilots again. And Joshua did the same thing. He's also been invited to multiple overseas events. He acquired a few extra sponsors, like Teams Black Sheep, overseas sponsors, battery sponsors as well, to keep him going. But we also, during this time, started like formalizing and getting some more stuff organized. So you'd see for this next year and our next season, because we end our seasons with the Nationals, we now had full posters. We were inviting spectators to come along and see, and at some of the events we've had up to 200 spectators come and ride along, and we'd have goggles available for them to actually do that. And then all the different clubs and representatives were starting to organize their own stuff and promote. So the sport grew quite a bit, and we've seen, events going for regional events, we're going from 12 pilots to now we're sitting at 32, if not almost 40 pilots, which is tough to organize. And then we also thought, well, we need to now abide by proficiencies. And our proficiencies for line of sight now are harder than your RPL. So if you want to get real practice and do this before your RPL, come find one of our instructors and do one of our proficiencies, especially the advanced. So I'm a full instructor for line of sight, advanced, and FPV. And we've got all of the documentation on our website. You can download, and then you can view all the maneuvers that you'll need to complete in a 10 by 10 box. And that's now all in place. And during our last Nationals 2 weeks ago, we've tested, I think, around 24 pilots and put them through solo. But it's a nice thing to see now that we're going to be able to show people that they've got a full proficiency up to FPV. The idea is just to get as many people to solo as possible. And that was our last Power Nationals. This is the poster for that, which I explained. And that's Devon, who you rode along with at the beginning of the presentation. So another part of it is freestyle. That's another thing of the sport that's now grown. And a lot of guys prefer expressive flying and just going to a park and having fun. This is Elijah Bork. He's one of my team pilots. He's 16 years old. They perform these maneuvers 2 minutes to music. In Power Nationals, we ran 3 rounds, 1 round per day. 5 judges looking at their performance through goggles. So they're actually riding along with the pilot. They're looking at flow, how he flows from one maneuver to another. They're looking at difficulty, how difficult the maneuvers are. They're then looking at how he uses the obstacles. So has he used the gates and all of that on the course? And then the last criteria is I'd give them a curveball every day. And it's an unknown maneuver, but it's a mandatory maneuver. And on the first day, they had to do 3 consecutive power loops through an obstacle. And then this day, he had to go dive down the box and enter out the side. If you entered out the side in an opposite direction, you got more points. And then on the other day, we gave a maneuver which was an inverted yaw spin. Elijah will do it in the next, I think, somewhere in this video he does one, but I'll show you. And that's unbelievable. It's a Rubik's Cube, which just mind blown. And now he'll do an inverted yaw spin, so you'll see upside down and all the way around. Cool. So what's next? We are taking a team to Shenzhen. The team was basically selected from our regional events in this last national results, and we'll be taking them to the FIA China Open in Shenzhen. Oh, actually that happened this weekend, but to the World Championships. It's 1 junior pilot, 3 senior pilots, and a team manager. And that was the track they had this last weekend in Shenzhen. And the winner of that was an 11-year-old kid from Thailand. And it's a girl. And her name's Milk, and she's unbelievable in terms of her pilot skill. But this is what we're going to be going to in November, taking the team to represent the country. We're looking for sponsors. And we've obviously got our season starting now, so the guys start next month with their regional events to start the 2018-2019 season. And obviously we want to grow it from there. So, cool.